get into Shannon Oliver sent me a video of a guy called Wyatt Stagg on YouTube. And he said, hey, this guy might be really worth looking at. He is doing reviews of movies. And Shannon said to me, he kind of reminds me of what Black Pilled could or should have been. And I concur. After watching the video, 99% of it, I thought, yeah, I like his breakdown here. As you all know, I detest this pinky in the air movie reviews where they take the fiction and they non-fictionalize it. They talk about it as though it's real. I hate that. That is, not only is that a perfect waste of time, but that is detrimental in the extreme. I mean, just imagine that what we know here in service to white well-being, the power of fiction over our lives. Subconscious mind controls 95 to 99% of our lives. The subconscious mind consumes the fiction, doesn't know that it's not real, can't know that it's not real, no matter how many times consciously you say it, can't know. And then we live our lives according to that fiction. This is the psychological warfare that controls the human animal, controls the world. And it's so powerful because of the hubris of mankind and its subconscious, its conscious mind that believes that it can override, that it cannot be tricked, that it can just say it's not real, and then it's not real for them. To then take fiction and talk about it as though it's real, to non-fictionalize it, to talk about the motives of characters in a movie, that is, or a book, or etc., that is beyond a waste of time. It is extremely harmful. You should never participate in that. Wyatt does not do that in his review of 28 Days. Thank the good Lord. Instead, he talks about what the filmmakers are doing with this narrative. He talks about how it's anti-white. Very happy to hear anti-white in there. And he takes every element throughout the movie, exactly like we do in the past when we have broken them down. And we talk about and what we teach you on how to when you watch, what to do when you watch or imbibe entertainment at all, how to evaluate it, how to consciously be engaged the entire time. This is how they're trying to manipulate me. You know, by the way, when you are interrupting the fiction, it makes it harder for the fiction to be received by the subconscious mind as reality because you keep interrupting it. And the real world can't be interrupted. So the subconscious, that's how you get the subconscious mind out of perceiving that it's reality. You're being an active participant. So he's going through, and I'm going to show you a little clip of one of his conclusions that I concurred with robustly. But then he gets into the very final seconds, literally, of this video, which is 22 minutes, 48 seconds long, looks like. And he gets into the final seconds, and he takes this U-turn. He takes this turn into left field. He takes this turn into oblivion. He takes this turn into an admonition of what we have to do, how we have to behave if the reality of our victimization is going to change. And I could not disagree with him more in that. And so that's what I wanted to talk about. It's a big problem in the white sympathetic sphere, especially the explicit white sympathetic sphere, because you get nothing positive out of hate. Nothing. And yet this is an endless argument that I've had over the years in this sphere. 30 years of absolute tyranny of the tards, claiming that you have to hate That's what does it. Well, it's been 30 years. It hasn't done it. And it didn't do it before then either. And there isn't a case in history where it's ever done it. Let's take a look at a part of this breakdown on 28 Days Later and White Rage by Wyatt Stagg.
This, then, is the real meaning of 28 Days Later. The white race is a destructive force proliferating itself through consumption, violence, and reproduction. This force has been in the modern world contained through a state and media program of psychological confinement and conditioning designed to pacify and ultimately rehabilitate it, which, though appearing inhumane, is in fact justified and necessary. At any time, however, human actions could cause it to be unleashed upon the world, with existential consequences for mankind. The only cure for this racial sickness and the threat it poses to human posterity is the eradication of its carriers, through violence or through racial mixing. Only those whites who have accepted hybridization with the racial other will survive, and their non-white offspring will inherit a new England and a new Western world.
All right, so as you can see, that's a splendid conclusion. We're about just beyond halfway through about what this 28 Days Later movie is really all about. He's not talking about the character's emotions and why the character was hurt or how the character was hurt in the past, and that's why the character is doing this now and what the character might be thinking. Instead, he's talking about how anti-white the messaging is, how it's manipulating the audience in subtle ways. And I concur with that conclusion about I've never seen this movie, but I concur with him with that conclusion. However, we get here to the end of this breakdown, and I could not disagree more.
If they are to live, a people must have the will to fight and the will to hate. If they are to live, a people must have the will to fight and the will to hate. If they are to live, a people must have the will to fight and the will to hate. This is the incontrovertible truth of life in this world, made hideous in our eyes because it is viewed through the clouded lens of a false morality that condemns as evil the demands that survival makes of us, and the very instincts that empower us to meet them. For as long as we despise those instincts, whether they reveal themselves in hatred or in prejudice or in anger, we despise an inalienable part of our own being, and this reviled inner nature will appear in our eyes as a monster to wreak a vengeance upon us. But if we embrace it without judgment or reproof, the veil will be lifted, and it will show itself as a friend once more.
100% wrong. 100%. Do not heed that admonition. 100% wrong. Let's talk about this. I mean, in there at the end, saying whether it's hate, whether it's prejudice. What does prejudice mean today to our brothers and sisters? Anger. Now, we're getting into something a little different with anger, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But shockingly, this individual who's throughout the totality of this review making a splendid review that you just don't see anywhere else, comes to a conclusion that I firmly disagree with. So let's talk about, he calls for a will to hate. Do white people, when you are in the white sympathetic sphere, is there any paucity of hatred? I mean, honestly, if there's any emotion at conferences and at barbecues, and there's any emotion that is more present, it's hatred. That's the most present emotion at your typical white sympathetic. That's the reality. It's not a lack of hatred. But let's get into this. What is hate? Well, the definition that matters is the definition that's in the heads of our brothers and sisters. Why does it matter there? Because those are the people that we have to persuade, our white brothers and sisters, to come over and object to, do combat with, contend with anti-whiteism. So the definition of things, the functional definition in their heads, is what matters to us. So for them, hate, is a meme pathogen that they've learned over the course of their lives, that their subconscious mind has been intimately in countless iterations with non-white people or other groups, privileged groups, such as people who think that they're a different sex than they are, or what have you, or maybe a different religion or odd religion, being persecuted. And our brothers and sisters have been there with them. They know it's real. It happens in the world, even though they have no actual real world experience with it. This is the way of the psychological warfare. So it's a meme pathogen. And what does hate mean? It means whites thinking ill of non-whites, wanting ill, inflicting ill on innocent non-whites on the basis of their birth. That's what hatred is. In the minds, the functional definition, in the minds of our brothers and sisters. That's what we have to work with. So number one, going to our brothers and sisters and saying to them, you have to embrace hate, is such a non-starter. It's worse. It's a going backwarder. You go backwards if you go to our brothers and sisters and say, you've got to embrace the hate. It's perfectly asinine. And I'm not saying, just to be very clear here, that Wyatt was saying that you should approach white brothers and sisters, or you should give speeches telling people whites are brothers and sisters, that you should embrace the hate. You know, he makes a 30-minute long review, and there are a lot of puissant bits along the way. He gets to the very end. Maybe he's just tired. Maybe he just wants to finish the video and push it. I don't know. I'm just going to make my case about the asininity of the argument. Embrace hate. Embrace prejudice. What does hatred mean? So you can see the folly. You could really be a midget wit, and you would see the folly of going to our white brothers and sisters and telling them directly, or trying to put sugar on it, that they need to embrace the hate. What about the dictionary definition? In the dictionary, hatred is defined as intense or passionate dislike. What do you notice about that definition? Intense or passionate dislike. What do you notice? There's no action. Hating, then, is a thing in and of itself. It is its own act. There's nothing that follows. Hatred is intense or passionate dislike, as defined by the dictionary. So you're going to have the denotative definition, and then you could call it the connotative definition, everything that is wrapped around this concept. Everything that's wrapped around it happens to be anti-white, anti-whiteism, the attendant emotions as well, about what you're supposed to feel for somebody who is a hater, what you feel for somebody who is the kind of person who combats hate, right? So you have the denotative, you have the connotative, interestingly enough, and you'll see how this works its way in. Let's take a look at the definition of the word anger. Anger is a strong feeling of annoyance or displeasure. So far, there's no action, just like the word hate. But then it also says here, hostility. So anger is not just a position like hate is, but it is a moment. You don't feel anger incessantly. Anger is a moment. It's an action in a moment. Let me ask you then, do you have to think about all the things you don't like about an anti-white in order to prevent or avenge the victimization of our loved ones? Do you? If an anti-white is going to harm your child, your grandchild, niece or nephew, do you need to think about how you don't like their smell if it's an anti-white, non-white? You don't like their hair texture if it's a non-white, anti-white. Do you need to think about that? Or are you able to just defend? Do you need to think about how much you dislike that their crime rates are high? Do you need to think about how you don't like that they stick together? Do you need to do any of that to protect your loved ones from them? No. Hate is inaction. Love is action. Another example is, how quickly would you move into the life of a loved one who was getting into drugs? Say fentanyl. Say anything that's going to wreck them really quickly. How quickly would you get into their lives to prevent them from being victimized? Why would you do that? Because you love them. What do you do about, let's say it's a black guy on a street corner somewhere in the city you live selling that drug? Nothing. You do nothing. Because it's love that motivates action. Hatred is an act in itself. It motivates nothing. The reason you don't act in our defense is not because you don't hate, it's because you don't love. Here's a great example. All of the white girls who were gang raped by the anti-white rape gangs in the militaristic anti-white rape gangs, how did they all succumb to this? How were they all raped? How did this go on for decades? You want to blame the government. You want to blame, I don't know, Jews. You want to blame the leftist parties. You want to blame because you don't want to take responsibility. Fundamentally, how did this happen? Because for every white girl abducted and introduced to drugs and drink and then raped and gang raped and repeatedly suffering these victimization, how many white guys cared? Maybe the dad. Surely the father cared. Maybe there was an uncle or two because that was their niece. I mean, we're up to 3 guys now. In most cases, it's one guy. It's the dad. What if the white race saw itself as a people, and therefore the white little girls were all of their daughters? It would have been one white girl raped. And that would have been the end of it. Because every white man feeling love for his people, and therefore the daughters of the West, would have moved to prevent such a thing from ever happening again by whatever means. And we'll be talking about the means in a moment. That's a hard pill for the white race to swallow. It's not the fault of the Arabs, the anti-white Arabs, or the anti-white Asians, as they're called over there. It's not the fault of the government. It's not the fault of the environment. It's not the fault of the economy. It's the white race's fault. Little white girl after little white girl succumbing to this disease that's allowed to rot because of the white race. one after the other, with only one white guy, her father, to complain about it. Then you have these clowns that step forward and say, well, her dad was mad and he went to their house and they arrested him. Can you believe how bad this is? Yeah, the thing that's bad is that it was just her dad. If we had a people born out of love, that's how you have it, it would have been one white girl victimized. Maybe not even one. But if one, that would have been the end of it. If the white race were unified in love as a people, with every white guy loving every white child, because they are ours, they belong to our people, then I think these communities coming in, will they be even allowed to come in such an environment? But if they did, how would they look upon the children of a group of people who value them as themselves? The totality of the group. Whose fault is this? It's the white race's fault. What remedies it? Love. How much hate has there been for the Asians or the Arabs or the Indians? How much hatred has there been? Why didn't that fix it? It's important to say, as we're moving through this, that this is not just semantics. This is not just a matter of, you hate that which harms what you love. That's not even accurate. You don't idly sit by in an act in and of itself for that which victimizes what you love. If you love it, you act. And when you act, you might be angry, but you never tend toward the inaction of hatred. This is an extremely important differentiation. Here are the errors that you really have to pay attention to. And there are several in this. The notion that you justify or instigate the defense of our people with hate. That's the first error. The reality is you justify and instigate group defense with love, as I just demonstrated with the UK example. Hate, feelings of ill will for the thing you don't like, again, is the action in and of itself. While love to protect that which you love moves you to action to thwart that harm. Do you see the difference? Another important fundamental error is made in observation versus instigation. Hate is seen as mad, gritted teeth, and an angry face. Love is seen as baby kisses and a happy face. When a person physically fights, and there's another error in the physically fights part of this that is so fundamental, quintessential to the inaction of the white race, and we'll get to it in a minute. But when a person physically fights someone, there are more superficial, observable similarities to hate, gritted teeth, an angry face. Then there are similarities to love. And so the average or midget wit incorrectly thinks that hate is the precursor to group defense. But the reality is there is never more instigation to extreme group defense than love. Think for a moment only of a mother grizzly bear. Does the mother grizzly wander through life hating humanity? No. She acts with anger a moment out of love to protect her cubs, with a ferocity that drives her even to combat male grizzlies that can be, in some cases, as much as 2/3 their size, with such ferocity, driving off the male, 2/3 her size, that could kill her easily. That's love. Another error is thinking that defending our people and our expressions is physical violence, or is even always physical violence. In a civilized world, there are countless tools for defending what you love, and love will motivate you to use those tools. Physical violence is prohibited, it's shunned, it's illegal in a civilized society. Everyone embracing hate so as to exercise physical violence, and we just pointed out that even that's erroneous. Hate does not lead necessarily to great acts of physical violence. Everyone embracing hate so as to exercise physical violence in the defense of our group has to wait for societal collapse. They can't exercise, and as I say these things, you know, you're thinking that you've had these conversations where you're going to have these epiphanic moments about those conversations in memory, where you're thinking, yeah, that's exactly what those guys were saying. Yes, they erroneously conclude that hate necessarily leads to physical violence, or physical, maybe it's also better to say a self-sacrificing physical violence. Because to commit an act of physical violence where you're likely to get away with it, because you're always slapped on the wrist, a la the anti-white terrorist who punched Holly in the face. He hates the white race. He's likely to get away with the physical violence. That's very different from an act of physical violence that might end your life. You should be able to see the difference. But even there, this erroneous notion that hatred leads to great acts of physical violence, self-sacrifice in the form of physical violence, is still something that has to wait until we've lost everything. It's still something that has to wait until our society has completely collapsed before you can finally do something. Meanwhile, there are countless tools we've demonstrated with our practice that you can use in the schools right now, in the boardroom right now, in the factory, in the shop right now to arrest our victimization. Countless tools that are ignored in this vain, erroneous, specious notion that at some point in the future, when you've hated long enough and you embrace the hatred inside of you, when our society has collapsed and all of our children are being raped, then you're going to be out there and physically violent. These are the notions of absolute rejects, of midget-witted tards, ladies and gentlemen, who in their superior numbers to those with higher intelligence push you around on the internet and determine the course of what's going to be popular because you won't push back. The time to act, to recapture our destiny, is now with the tools in our civilized society. We have proven these tools work. There are countless examples of such tools. No one is going to do anything when society collapses. You all will be at the breadline begging, and most of you will be dead because you won't be able to get your medicine. Another error is taken from the behavior of governments when they dehumanize other populations. Thinking that the dehumanization through hate and hatred is necessary to instigate self or group defense. Dehumanization is apples and oranges when we're talking about a government doing it and you and I doing it. Dehumanization is used by a country's leaders to legitimize harming another population. You don't need legitimization through dehumanization by way of hatred to defend our people. Do you understand, guards? The difference here, when the government does it, is that the dehumanization is part of a wider effort that incorporates legal punishments for refusal or reluctance to harm the other population. As it is officially the dehumanization, the harming of the other population, as it is officially sanctioned or permitted by the government, the anti-white oligarchs, whatever it is, it satisfies the all-important need of the white race for order and is therefore received in a more favorable light. When you approach a brother or sister and you say, we need to hate this other group to dehumanize them so that we can physically harm them. Look at all of the errors. Every single fucking thought is erroneous. Every one is wrong. Think about that. But when you go, just to make my point there, when you go to a brother or sister and you say something this stupid, you don't come with the presence of societal order, which a white person feels is harmony with our biospirit. You show up with disorder. You show up wanting to break the order. And our brothers and sisters instinctively reject that. So it's apples and oranges to say the state dehumanizes a population when they want you to go kill them. I hope that's enough. If you have any questions about whether or not love motivates or hate motivates, I think it's pretty clear. Hate is an act in and of itself. Even the people that you hate don't suffer it. You feel it. And it's an ugly thing. Imagine walking around. That's why I tell people, do not make white well-being an ugly, angry thing in your house, because then everybody will hate that. Nobody wants to be around somebody who is always hating, always has something ugly to say about another group, always complaining. No one wants. This is why so many of the children of white people who start off caring about our race and wanting to put an end to our victimization and what's being done to our countries, this is why their children turn against them 180 degrees. Mom is talking about race again. Dad's talking about race again. I'm going to get yelled at. The house is on edge. When you talk about our people, the people in the house should receive it as love. The people in the house should receive it, if it's about our victimization, as urgency, moral urgency, righteous urgency. We have to go protect those white kids at that school. We have to say something to end the victimization of the white kids at that school. Mom's doing a good thing. She's fired up again. You know, she gets on her moral high horse. She wants to get out there and she wants to protect those white kids. I mean, I understand it. Versus mom is saying, oh, the little inners did that. Such these little inners. Screaming in the house like a psychopath. So hate is an act in and of itself. It's only affecting you. The ill will that you're feeling isn't experienced by anybody else. It's all experienced by you and the people around you, your family members. Moreover, in the real world and in your own subconscious mind, hate is the mean pathogen hate. It is white people harming non-white people because of the way they're born. You end up your whole life. How many of you have known old white people or white people that have passed on? I mean, I just saw a video of an anti-white pig made a song, white pig, made a song about how much she hated her white grandfather because he was just hating on the non-white races all the time, saying crazy shit. The family hates you when you hate on other groups. But the worst part about it is that you're not doing anything for us. You live an entire lifetime feeling ill will toward other groups, and then you die. That was a fruitful life. You live an entire life, a la the UK, watching thousands, tens of thousands of white little girls be gang raped by anti-whites from another land. And boy, you hated them good. You hated them all day long. You hated them every day and every week of every month of every year. And now you're dead. You know what else about hate I like to point out? You never go to war against something you hate. Why would you sacrifice even a fingernail for something you hate? Of course you don't. You won't. And no white people who approach the well-being of whites have ever sacrificed themselves for hating some other group. And I've said it many times. I'll continue to say it. Every white man in a trench, sacrificing, putting his life, his limbs, his dignity on the line, his eyesight, his hearing, his flesh on the line in those trenches, isn't doing it 1 ounce for what he hates across the battlefield. 100%. It's for what he loves behind him. It is not a lack of hate. It is a lack of love. And here's the problem. That love is seen as kisses and a smiley face, and so it couldn't possibly defend us. Well, you need to stop listening to these mid and midget wit losers. And the mid and midget wit losers, you know that you're dumb. You know that I see clearer than you. Time to submit. I'm not asking. I don't give a shit if you turn around and say, well, he's arrogant or whatever. I don't care. Then you're going to be out of the gene pool. It's time to call what's left, the remnant of what is truly men and women of the West out of this garbage white race. Because it's too late for all of these others who can't see where they fall in the pecking order. If you have any doubt, think again about the fire of a mother grizzly and so many other mother animals. They're not hating. They're not thinking about anything else out there. Not a single thought to go to war that would end their own life for what they love. It is not hate. It is love. So you got to hate, and then the hate, they say, instigates physical violence. And that's what we need, physical violence. But even that is an error, because the physical violence engendered by hatred and the conclusion drawn by the similarities between the ugly faces and the ugly thoughts that you have when you're hating, and the similarity to that when you're in a fist fight. The acts of violence committed out of hatred are committed mostly by those who can do it and get away with it. or who will just be slapped on the wrist. Then you have the next tier of error, which is that physical violence is the only way that we can defend ourselves. That, indeed, as I said, is an act that has to wait for us to have lost everything before it gets started. I mean, you even have people, as I was talking about, in this Oh Glory Club, and I don't know if that it's all of them. I don't know if it's a normal theme. I don't know what it is. But they talk about the after the fall. There ain't no after the fall. There ain't no after the fall. Stop being a coward. It is now or never. How many more white children do you have to see butchered and raped and gang raped? How many more fully grown white men being jumped in Cincinnati, crying out to God himself to intervene because everything has been white erased? No law enforcement there to protect him, and his life not mattering. No fear in the heads of those who attack him of what will be done to them for their anti-white lynching. That's gone because of the white erasure. Once everything falls, go to hell. You're a coward, and I'm calling you out. And everybody who follows you should abandon you immediately after the fall. So if there's any more questions about what motivates us, any more question about what's going to save us, men and women of the West who love our people as our family, our tribe, they will engage in every imaginable act of self-defense. They will utilize the myriad tools at their disposal at the hospital, at the sheet metal factory, at the lawyer firm, at the state government, at the federal government. They will work through industry, through private and public associations. They will fight out of love with every imaginable tool. And if it does ever come down to physical violence, it is the physical violence of the mother grizzly. It is the physical violence that will come at you with so many claws, so many teeth, such a thick hide, and with such indifference to its own life that nothing will survive. Everything will wither before it. Hate, you are a joke. You're an absolute bitch of a clown if that's what you endorse. You are a tool of the anti-white. And to talk about being a tool of the anti-white, and I'm not coming down individually or personally on Wyatt here. I understand. We grow up in a world that is anti-white. We grow up in this world that tells us also how we are supposed to defend ourselves. How are white people supposed to climb through that quagmire? How are they supposed to get a breath of freedom? How are they supposed to be liberated? I get it. So I have sympathy and empathy even when you're doing something that I completely disagree with. But I have been here for decades. I have been on the internet for almost a decade, sharing these views. So many white people have come and gone. So many white people. They don't come and say, this is genius. It's working. It's the only thing working. I pledge allegiance, publicly saying, I pledge allegiance, like Orville did to Fuentes. I pledge allegiance to white well-being, white positivity. Instead, the white race putters along. You're going to be your own little Hitler, aren't you? Look at the Indian race from India. They're superior to the white race in this way, in my opinion. When Indians in India find an Indian that is sagacious or brilliant, he has a discernment greater than the average. What do they do in India? They decide he is touched by the gods and they surround him. Have you seen the videos? You don't have to speak any of the weird ass languages in India to see that there's a guy sitting in the middle of 2,000 showing up out of just the local town, 10,000 in stadiums showing up to ask, to receive, to comply. They're able to see this guy is seeing further than me, is seeing clearer than me. They don't even have to fake in India that they're talking to this god or that god. Indians just see, wow, he's really bright. What he suggests works. When he spells it out, it's logical. A, then B, then C. And then I can see it's logical, and then I see it working for people. So I'm going to submit myself to that. Where is that in the white race? Nowhere. The white race looks for credentials, and it doesn't matter how much illogicality, how many failures, how much a lack of success comes out of such white men and women, males and females. He's got a PhD. He's a professor. He's a whatever. That's what the white race does. Someone else, something else has determined. The white race utterly incapable of submitting itself on average like the rest of the races of the world. Keep telling me again, white supremacists, how much better we are. You little are out there following Emily Saves America, Sarah Stock, Fuentes. That's what the white race does. No ability. How are we supposed to come together with anything efficacious? Sickening. So while I'm not coming down, like I said, Wyatt made a stupendous analysis of 28 days later. And I laud his conclusions all up until those final seconds of this video. We all have growth. We all have room to grow. I don't know, for example, the other day, I don't know anything about Danunaki, except he's in the community. He's always in the comments like a champion. He gave a couple of suggestions for MCs, and I immediately recognized that they were genius. Immediately recognized those have to be used, because I'm able to submit myself to the greater goal of white well-being, because I don't want to see white children being raped. There is no ego here to replace the goal. There never has been. And how much does the white race respect that? If a Jewish leader had given 3 decades of setting himself aside for the good of Jews, every Jew would know who he was. If in India, so many of these schmucks, anti-non-whites, they love to shit on the Indians. Well, the Indians got this right. Every Indian would know the name of the Indian who saw clearer than they did, saw further than they did, had better outcomes than they could achieve. And they submitted themselves to that. By submitting yourself to that, you become an engine. You become a people. even though, and so I don't hold it against you all, even though Wyatt had this magnificent review, I concurred with everything he said up until the very end, he still fell prey. And so I'm sympathetic, I'm empathetic to everyone else. The authors of anti-white fiction imbue the whites in their narratives with objectionable characteristics and a defeatable amount of power. I'm going to say it again. The authors of anti-white fiction and fictionalized reality always imbue the evil white people, whether the white people are represented by a metaphor or the white people are literal white actors or characters in a book where they say, well, he had blue eyes to make you know. He had very light skin and had blue eyes to make you know. Whatever way they present whites, they always imbue them with objectionable characteristics and a defeatable amount of power. White people, the average white person, and this is because of, the dichotomy, the two hemispheres, the ones and zeros, the binary nature of our thinking, which doesn't affect me as much as it affects the vast majority of our population and every population. And I said all the way back in high school that it was a result, or that I speculated that it was a consequence of there being two hemispheres. And what was it, 5 years ago or so? Scientists, biological scientists came out and they said, we think this phenomenon of viewing everything as an up or down, right or left, black or white in human thinking is a result of there being two hemispheres. You're welcome. So what do they do? What do most white people do, including Wyatt here, when they look at the stories of the anti-whites and they see the white characters imbued with the objectionable characteristics? What are the objectionable characteristics specifically in 28 Days Later, specifically articulated by Wyatt? Blind rage, hatred. So, binary nature of thinking. If we're not the anti-whites, we embrace our representation as blind, raged, hating white people, embracing the villain in their story. Folks, that is the essence of an anti-white author, an anti-white creator within the anti-white narrative. What's white, what is projected into the world that is white, is imbued in their stories with objectionable characteristics, not your path to victory. An anti-white author is never going to say, the white villains in my book, in my movie, are the villains because they are willing to sacrifice themselves out of love for their people. They are never going to give it to you on a plate. They're never going to say, here, you dumbass white person who can only think in this binary midwit way. Here it is for you. The villains in the movie are the white people, and they are imbued with such great love for themselves, for their children, for their men, for their creations, that they are willing to sacrifice their own lives. Therefore, they need to be killed. Therefore, they need to be white erased. You have to look at all anti-white fiction as lies, manipulation, including the characteristics of the white people, the white villain. the metaphor of the white race as lies. You are not the villain in their story. You are the hero in ours. Some of you are saying, I've heard Jason say this 10,000 times. I'm going to say it 100,000 more, because unfortunately, the white race in so many ways is inferior to the other races of mankind. They do not know how to submit themselves to lucidity beyond their reckoning. They can only submit themselves to a beautiful, vacuous female. They can only submit themselves to somebody who is going to prosecute a case against their scapegoat better than they can, so that they have even more reason to not take responsibility. By the way, I've talked about this before, I've given speeches on it before. Engaging in geopolitics, subject matter like this, over which you exercise no influence whatsoever, no power whatsoever, is the ultimate in irresponsibility. You have victimization of whites in your very life that you can attend to, you can do something about. These people are not doing something important by indulging conversations over which they exercise no authority. They are literally white flighting away from any responsibility in their life.